used for whores on a Saturday afternoon. Ninfa needed one, and as it turned out, that made it so I did. We didn't skirt the issue. We got to work under the valley's incessant sun and the thorny mesquites lining her neighborhood. Let's go get you a girl, I said, turning up the volume on my car stereo, adding a soundtrack to our hunt. She was girl number 1, and we looked for girl number 2. Recently, Ninfa shifts the course of my evenings like a curse. I've started thinking of her when my husband climbs into bed beside me. Ninfa is my obsession. I worry my conscience is too cheaply thrilled by this legendary, elusive prostitute, by this controversial character who I've started calling friend. On nights when I've spent long hours writing of her, thinking of her, listening to her, and coming home late after seeing her, I imagine myself as her when my husband leans over and I feel his unrazored face scour the side of mine. I am Ninfa when he turns me over and runs his fingers along my spine and the back of my legs. Even in the obscurity of the night, I see the dark purple bruises, hickeys that appear on the lower curve of Ninfa's neck every few weeks. The stamp of one of her lovers, a single John among many. My husband is unaware that at times I've grown repulsed by sex because it's a part of every single one of Ninfa's conversations, and I aim to detach myself from them, because in her mouth, sex sounds dirty. She says sex and laughs when she's proud of herself and her exploits, or she says sex and cries. I narrow my gaze to blur the image of my husband's silhouette above me. I cover my eyes with our sheets when he reaches for me at daybreak and finds me far away against the opposite side, nestled against the wall. I've grown passive in our bed. The image of Ninfa has invaded me, and if I do not see myself as her, I see her at our feet, telling us to relax like she tells her Johns, turning on the area fan, massaging our legs or taking off her blouse. It lies in a pool of black nylon in the corner of our room. She smiles. She does not touch me more than necessary. She prefers to touch my husband. Her large breast falls soft across her chest, across the blanket at the edge of us. For now, Ninfa haunts me. She's both inside and outside of me. She's woven herself into my fabric. At times, I'm saturated with sex the same way she's saturated with sex. My knowledge of her burdens me. I feel full with the anonymous sex I've never had, with the men I will never meet, never touch, never let kiss me, with the money they would give me that would never be enough. But the mornings, all of them, bring the promise of a new canvas, a cleansed state, a wiped chalkboard with its dust settling on me like powdered sugar, a thin film of it refusing to ever wash away completely. On mornings when I plan to see her, I start over from scratch. I let her build the day with her words and actions. I let my imagination rest. It's only under this false pretext of authority that I am able to work and document her life, because she's asked me to write a book of her, while my original intention was merely to find her. Esta leyenda regional. Yes, I meant to write of her a poem, an essay, a manageable piece, because she is, after all, folklore. She's the local character we hear about as children, but whose existence we can never verify. Mira es a Ninfa, we'd whisper. Look, we'd say, it's Ninfa. We feigned understanding. She's my hometown of Harlingen's Llorona, roaming the streets at night. She's our villa, our che. I would write something manageable, something I could cup in the palms of my hands while getting to know her. But that wouldn't do, not for Ninfa. She wanted more from me. She wanted commitment, a long-term contract that would bind us. She's writing a book about me, Ninfa told her friends. I stood beside her, stunned by the depth and breadth of the accusation. I nodded, smiled, said yes to her friends at the park, while shooing away men who thought I was her protege. Today, I woke to the thought of Ninfa and stood next to a window as I called her and watched the morning wane with each ring. So, she said as she answered, I've got a date who might be coming, and, she paused, he wants 2 girls. 2, I verified. 2, she said, looking out the window. It's been months since she decided I'd author her book. With time, I asked Ninfa if I could watch her with one of her Johns. I wanted to see her work her magic, work her men. I wanted to see the details that give her career such longevity. It's the closest I can get to her. It's the only way I know to authenticate what she does. It's the undesirable step I know I had to take when I stopped being able to visualize her descriptions. She didn't flinch when I asked. Instead, she said, of course, dear. But that was 2 months ago, and I've since called her 2 or 3 times a week to ask if she's expecting dates or if dates visited recently. Each time she told me she didn't know or simply no. It's the holidays, people run out of money, she'd say. Do you get it? She'd ask in her trademark way. For months, her Johns were phantoms. Today, she said, finally, right, you get your chance. When we arrived at her park, her place of regular business, I refused to leave the car because I argued I looked too nice for La Placita. La Placita hadn't been in the plans when I dressed this morning and made a date to see my family post-Ninfa visit. But she didn't buy it. She wanted my company. She said men would swarm her if she sat alone. I reminded her we'd be co-swarmed if we sat there together. Just drive around then, she said, and I positioned the extra long chili cheese hot dog I bought her for lunch on my lap. As I drove around Harlingen's downtown area, I found myself looping the following phrase in my mind. Where are all the whores hiding? The language I use in the vicinity of La Placita has become as vulgar as the things I see there. Look in the alleys, Ninfa said. I drove down alleyways of neighborhoods I never noticed because there were 1 or 2 streets off the main avenues and I've led an apparently sheltered life. The wooden plank houses rose from dirt and gravel, their gardens with spindly weeds quivered uneasily in the wind, and guard dogs too tired or hungry to bark limped to and from trash heaps. Foil-covered windows and brown, worn, and sun-drenched described everything. The streets were desolate except for 1 or 2 people making their way where the dirty white of the curb met the charcoal asphalt. I heard. I just saw one, and I sped to catch up to her. I saw a woman in her 40s, on crack, Ninfa said, shaking her head. Hell no, she added. Esa ruca le roba los vatos. The alleged hooker looked shady in her khaki shorts that were a few sizes too small. She wore a stained cotton crop top with a single roll of fat exposed below it. We circled the area 2 or 3 more times. Salen toda la noche y duermen todo el día, Ninfa said as she continued her running commentary on the missing prostitutes. Streetwalkers as vampires, out all night, sleep all day. When you don't need them, they're everywhere, and when you need one, you can't find one, she said. I pointed at pedestrians, to women with children and husbands, to men in anything tight or ill-fitting. Eventually, I just pointed. Is she one? I kept asking. I knew she was asking herself the same question because she looked where I looked. Women as prostitutes, all women as prostitutes, tricks up their sleeves, all men as pimps or gigolos, tricks in their pants, we the people. Then she remembered the shell I call a brothel, the self-sufficient house of whores, the house that rents rooms and nooks to women who are employed primarily, exclusively as sex workers, on Washington and First Street, with a vacant room for rent. Ninfa thought about filling before I dissuaded her, telling her the conditions there seemed far more decrepit than her own pest-infested place. The orange-pink house propped up on cinder blocks. Take me there, she said. When we arrived from where I sat as driver, I saw only a pair of legs, a torso, and a cell phone. A woman at her stoop, her legs pale and dusty with yellow undertones covered in sores, lumps, cellulite, an array of fading purple-yellow bruises. Ninfa rolled down the passenger side window, told me to get closer to the woman with legs. You got stuff? The woman asked. She wanted drugs. And Ninfa yelled out that no, she didn't have stuff, that she had a man, a date, a John. Well, where is he? She asked too loudly, and Ninfa waved her over. She rested her arm against the open window and displayed an aging tattoo, a line with its mouth wide open, its eyes half closed in mid-roar, someone's messy, vanishing artwork. I tore a page from my notebook and handed it to the woman so she could write down her cell phone number for Ninfa. You new in town, Ninfa asked, and curtly the woman said yes before she turned and walked back toward her stoop. Call me, she said, an afterthought. Ninfa smiled, nodded, and rolled up the window as we drove away. Hell no, I'm not calling her. Hell no, if I don't know her, I'm not calling. I appreciated Ninfa's wariness and told her so. We drove the 3 blocks to Ninfa's place, and when we arrived, it looked like I would be parading her street after all, because people there took the concept of neighborhood watch too literally. I pulled on a light sweater I found in the backseat of my car. I noticed silver thread interspersed in its weave. It sparkled slightly in the sun and made me self-conscious. I put on my sunglasses, pulled back my hair, tugged at my blouse, and covered as much of my skin as I could. You're coming inside, Ninfa said, and I looked at my watch, rechecked the time on my cell phone, did mental math, and then said, yes, of course I am. I reminded her of my family plans, then I reminded myself of how long I'd waited to see her with a man. I suffocated mild nausea and decided to repark my car farther down the road so that if the John kept his word and showed, he might not see it on the way out. I'd rather he not know what I drove. I looked at my feet as I walked behind Ninfa along the pathway to her apartment. I deliberately evaded men's stares as they barbecued outside, their bush tall boys in hand, the sun approaching only mid-sky. Inside her apartment, we waited, we sat, we waited. She left the front door open and it brought much needed light into the room. She watched traffic passing by and every now and then lifted her hand and waved, smiled at some old man walking by, at some old man driving an old pickup truck back and forth in front of her apartment. He's just a friend, she'd say of one. He's a date, absent-mindedly, she'd say of another. We waited, we sat, we waited for a sign from the John. Oh, I heard Ninfa say. She remembered something. She stood up and came back minutes later in full spandex. She replaced her airy black blouse with the tight-fitting neon flowers of one of her favorite at-home outfits. She noticed me noticing her. She carried a milk jug half full of water. For good luck, she said before pouring the water at the threshold of her apartment. The sunlight hit her face. I could see her concentrating, releasing the water methodically. She poured across at her doorstep on the inside portion on the thinning carpet at her feet. Then she crossed herself, muttered a prayer, and told me she knew God didn't approve of what she prayed for, but that sometimes she needed the help, that sometimes the water cross worked. I nodded repeatedly, silently, like an idiot. I continued to say nothing. She wanted me to understand that Johns perpetually made dates with her they didn't keep, and she needed this John to keep this date. I took notes. I looked at the damp cross at the foot of her door. I watched a car or two cross the street. I waited anxiously for something. I watched Ninfa pray. Then the phone rang, and I shuddered. The cross sometimes works, she said. The cross sometimes works, I wrote. Ninfa shifted gears at once. Her disposition changed. Her voice no longer lacked confidence as she sat and placed the phone to her lips. It was suddenly higher in pitch, smoother in tone, sexier in color. No, baby, she said into the receiver. I didn't find a girl. She looked at me and lifted her eyebrows. But, she continued, I do have a girl here with me. Just a friend, no, nothing like that. She doesn't do that. She told him, and I realized she spoke of me. No, I told you. She won't do that, Ninfa said. She likes to watch. I hesitated. My heart palpitated. I swallowed dryness. I began miming the act of writing. I mouthed writer to her, telepathically asked her to say I was doing research. Finally, she nodded, though hesitantly, then said she likes to watch because she's a writer. She hung up the phone, and it was on. She was on. So was he, so was I. I was part of the pending show now. I put my keys, notes, pen, and cell phone in my bag and then hid it, then stood up, sat down, then stood up again. I watched Ninfa in action. I took my cues from her. I followed her as she glided through her apartment. She turned off all the lights and closed the front door, though she left it unlocked for him. He's a politician and a lawyer, she told me earlier. I hope you don't know him, she added. I followed her into her bedroom and wondered what I was supposed to be doing now, how I should be preparing, what I should be preparing for. I hid my bag under a towel beside me, but took the mace off my keychain before doing so and slipped it into my back pocket just in case the politician got rowdy. Meanwhile, she closed the blinds, turned off the bedroom lamps, left the bathroom light on, and removed her blouse and bra. Meanwhile, he likes me undressed by the time he arrives, she said. She maneuvered around the room topless, and I surprised myself because I looked at her face instead of the nudity below it when I spoke to her, when I asked if I could take notes. I had to remind myself to look down, to look at the pale skin that dripped off her like wide folds of melting candle wax. She is heavy everywhere except her arms, her legs, her face. She is thick in the middle but manages to look fragile because she is short, because her limbs are thin, and because in that moment she fluttered around and around her king-size bed like a tiny undressed ladybug. It's best if you don't take notes, dear, she said, and I nodded. Yes, of course, how silly of me, I said. I hadn't even taken out a pen, I added, but knew she hadn't heard me. Then I asked if I should sit, or stand, or squat. Just stand there, she said, as she arranged the pillows and pulled off her socks. I could see the single electric blue flower of the spandex tank she'd worn in the corner on the carpet under the window unit where the air conditioner had been turned on. Her spandex wardrobe in a puddle, uncared for, unnecessary for effect. She only needed her skin. I concentrated on the hum of the synthetic air until, from the living room down the hall, I heard the opening and closing of the front door. I turned and saw the shadow of a man walking, about to reach the hallway. He arrived so fast, I thought, before I looked at Ninfa and pointed. "He's here," I whispered, and she nodded. She had been ready for him all day. The politician has grandchildren. He is a beardless, 60-something Santa Claus-sized grandfather with a wife and a tucked-in polo, belted jeans, and sneakers. His casual weekend apparel or his covert operations garb. He carries a cell phone that latches onto his brown leather belt, and his hair is thick and peppered white. I try to imagine the immediate future, the Politico as sex god. He walks with a quick stride like he's got places to go. He opens with, "So, you like to watch?" I nod, reassure him that, yes, I like to watch, and worry about any sarcasm slipped into that answer. I smile, try to look innocent, naive, in need. "Pull up a chair," he says, and Ninfa urges me to get one from the kitchen. I set the chair in my corner as they negotiate money. Ninfa sits on her king-size bed while he stands in front of her. Her face is tilted upward. "Where's my Christmas gift?" she asks again and again, and he hands her a folded bill. From my vantage point, I can't see what it is, but she sounds and looks unhappy. She asks him for her Christmas gift a fourth or fifth time before she gives up, nods, says okay, and throws the bill on top of her bedside table next to her. "All of it?" he asks, and she nods. "Yes, of course." The politician looks at me nervously as he disrobes. I look at him when he isn't looking at me, and at Ninfa when he is. He takes off everything. A Grecian sex god he is not. He stands before me, before her, in heaviness. He is much taller than Ninfa and wider. Like Ninfa, he too is pale. His body is covered with wide valleys, plateaus, and rolling hills of chalky flesh. Ninfa pulls off her spandex leggings, and she is left in black underwear. He is left in nothing. I sit fascinated by my lack of emotion, by my increasing objective detachment, by my inability to assign anything remotely sexual to the nude couple only a few feet in front of me. The pair have no sexual organs save for their breasts when they stand side by side. The weight of their lower stomachs makes their skin hang like curtains over their genitals. I cannot imagine how a sexual act will take place between them. I am on the edge of my chair, and I am suddenly self-aware. I try to comport myself with more decorum, but I am uncertain what that would be. Do I need to look entertained, aroused? Is that what is expected of me? Whose expectations am I trying to fulfill? Who is doing whom the favor? Am I pleasing the politician or myself? Where is Ninfa in all of this? Have I helped her by being the second girl he requested? I am a series of fleeting questions with no answers as I try to find an expression between objective observation and sexual interest. I adopt the crooked, ambiguous half-smile. Then it begins. He joins her on the bed. They both sit. Their feet are on the carpet next to each other. There is a sense of awkwardness between them, like this might be his first visit, but their familiarity with each other just prior indicates otherwise. I realize it's me. They are a bit awkward because they are putting on a show for me, for their audience of one. It's me who might be involved in the most lascivious behavior of all. I am the voyeur who does not even bother to hide herself while watching. Are they my victims? Am I theirs? Are we each other's? He leans his head and kisses her breasts. He spends too long on her nipples, and I can see Ninfa cringe, moan in pain. She is neither acting nor being coy. She is trying to hide her discomfort, but he insists. I hate sex. I've had enough of sex, she's told me in the past. I want to reach out and pull him off her, push him aside, tell him to stop hurting her, but for once, I know my place. She rests her hands on his body gently, then reaches up and holds his face. She tells him he is here to receive and not to give. It's your pleasure, she says, yet comfortable. I focus on the ongoing hum of the air conditioner as I watch him struggle to lift his body onto the bed. He has difficulty transitioning from vertical to horizontal. They grapple with each other as they find the most comfortable position for foreplay. They end up side by side. He is nearest me, she is on the farther end. He opens his legs to let her hand fish for his placid penis. She finds it before my eyes do. I see only shadows and intricate wrinkles of skin. Her hand wrestles and kneads his collection of flesh, coaxing an erection. They do not kiss each other's lips. Instead, his eyes are closed. He He's smiling and frowning alternatively, and she is kissing his chest. I let my mind wander while I watch. I think then of the democracy of sex, available for the masses, messy, persistent, imperfect. Sex as capital, a tool for barter, for profit, survival. I watch Ninfa and her politician. I think of the severity of sex and how for the virginal, for the religious and conservative, for me when I was 20, it was everything, and for Ninfa, it is also everything, but everything is defined so differently for her. Ninfa crawls out from the groove of his side to rest her body between his legs. He is still wearing socks. They are white and rise to the ankle. They are sports socks for a Saturday afternoon outing. She engulfs his now visible erection with her mouth. Ninfa, the expert, is on display before me. She furrows her brow as she moves his face back and forth, seamlessly back and forth. She is good at what she does. Fellatio is her forte. She's the best. The politician breathes in enough air to tell me. He is looking at me while he says this. I nod. His stare is making me nervous. I can see she is. She never hurts you, he adds. I keep nodding. I keep looking. I watch her on stage. She is lying on her stomach. Her bare feet with their red polished toenails are pointed and crossed. The bathroom light falls on her. Her skin looks smooth, young alabaster. Her actions are fluid and commanding. He is at her mercy. This position that could be at the hands of someone else entirely subordinating, she has seemingly inverted. He shudders in her clutch. She impresses me with her thoroughness, with the integrity of her job. She doesn't pause or rest or breathe. The room is silent as she works. There is only the strumming of her tongue as she flicks it up and down on the head of his penis. I concentrate on the sound emanating from the air vents. The room is a still life painting save for Ninfa's pendulum head and the slow rise and fall of the politician's chest. I count 2 minutes. 2 minutes more and Ninfa and the politician's sex act is over. He finishes in her mouth quickly and with no theatrics. Ninfa stands up and slowly, patiently walks to her bathroom. She leaves the door open and I hear only the short sounds of spitting and the trickling of water. The politician and I are now alone. He sighs deeply, tells me again that she's the best, tells me she's the only one I trust. Meaning, I ask. I have a lot of friends, judges, politicians. I understand. He means she's discreet. She's also honest, I say, to fill the silence, and because I've come to believe it nearly half the time. He nods, gets up, finds the pile of clothes at his feet, picks up the first piece and steps into it. Protection. Layers of fabric to hide his deeds from the world outside Ninfa's. What's your name? He asks, and I hesitate. I say nothing. Oh, I get it. You don't want me to know. If you see me around town, he adds, as he pats down his hair, please ignore me. Likewise, I say as Ninfa steps out of the bathroom to show me her bottle of Listerine. Everyone knows her, he continues. Even my grandkids know about her. They ask me if I know Ninfa and I laugh. I don't say anything. Like I said, she's the best. Ninfa beams. I told you, she says. I don't rush them. The politician's cell phone is ringing among the stacks of paper, money, and fake jewelry on Ninfa's bedside table. She looks at me and mouths, his wife. I don't know why, but I thank the politician as he leaves. Then Ninfa and I stare at each other for a while before I blurt out, well done, Ninfa. But she isn't listening. She's distant and thoughtful, and I'm grateful because I cannot believe that I've just said, well done. I sit down to take notes and ask her for a few minutes while she straightens up her room, opens the blinds, turns on the lights, turns off the air conditioner, and dresses. She infuses the room with potpourri scented air freshener, and as it settles on me, it does nothing to relieve how empty I feel sitting in this room. How much did he pay you? I ask. 20, she says, and we're both disappointed. He hasn't gotten paid yet, she adds in his defense or perhaps in her own. A politician waiting for his salary? I find this unlikely. The following week, I ask her if he paid her the rest, and I get a dismissive yeah. Later, she tells me he came by and dropped off more money, $30, and asked for nothing in return. Am I too jaded to believe politicians can be good people? Is giving Ninfa more money for a secret blowjob how I now define good? I was surprised you didn't use a condom, I say. He's fucked me and I've come out all right, she says, and the crass phrasing of her sentence without her usual excuse me as a disclaimer equally surprises me. You should have asked him that, she adds, sounding defensive. Like I've said before, dear, she says now a little more calmly, still pensive while sitting on the corner of her bed. I wouldn't do this if I didn't have to. If I won the lottery, I'd pay off the loan companies I owe and stop this, God hear me, she raises her hand to the ceiling. I would like to meet a good man, not for sex, she continues. Like I've said before, I'm tired of sex. I'm nodding, I strive to look engaged while I busy myself documenting the sex act. At the time, I do not realize I've made Ninfa feel the need to justify herself. Then her words successfully stop the pen in my hand. "Dear," she says, watching me, "you remind me of a jailer." I look up. "A jailer?" "Yes, a jailer. You know who I'm talking about, a jailer?" I tell her I do, that I know who a jailer is, the person who walks a prisoner to her jail cell, the person who turns the key to open it, who turns the key to lock it, the person who walks away forgetting to look back, forgetting the prisoner altogether. Ninfa resumes her place in the living room. The love seat is her station in between dates. She sits with her hands on her lap to watch the passers-by for the remainder of the day. I walk away down the pathway to my car. I feel her neighbor's stares, and above that I think I feel Ninfa's. I turn back to look at her, but she's already moved on. She's turned on the TV, she's straightening her earrings and fingering the $20 bill before she slips it out of sight beneath her clothing. Thank you.